So why are we playing into the Russian hand? It gave us a much better understanding of where the White House was going to go.
Do you think now that Europe is taking the threat seriously?
I think they see this threat very clearly. Again, when you look at the frontline states, meaning the countries closest to Russia, they've seen the writing on the wall for some time. It's the reason why Finland and Sweden, after hundreds of years of neutrality, joined NATO. The countries that used to be occupied by the Soviet Union, they don't want to go back to that. The Poles, the Balts, all of these Central Eastern European countries. But then as the further west you move to Italy, Spain, Portugal, those threat perceptions, like you said, start to shift. And the big problem we've had in Europe is that there's been a huge leadership gap. Europe has traditionally been driven by France and Germany. That is the basis of the formation of the European Union decades ago. It was really to prevent war between these two countries that literally fought each other for centuries, over and over and over again. And the European Union was successful in preventing that through this basic theory that the more integrated you are, the less likely you want to kill each other, and that has worked. So we have had peace on the continent, but they really underestimated the threat from Russia post the Soviet period. And we don't have a leader in Europe that could cohere a common European defense agenda, a common strategy, how to deal with the United States. And the US has taken a very different political turn. There's basically a hung parliament in France. So Macron is a very weak position. Germany has their elections. We'll see what happens, but I think it's very likely there's not going to be a coalition government for some time. So we'll have de facto paralyzed Germany. So where's that leadership going to come from? You have Poland, of course, which is the big heavyweight now in the East and spending, 5% of their defense. They have one of the most dynamic, booming economies, all the opportunities to emerge as a leader, but they haven't taken up that opportunity either. There's other leaders we can mention in Europe, but the bottom line is that there's a real vacuum. And it's really, really dangerous right now when you have an aggressor who is very good at sensing weakness and finding the right opportunity to invade militarily or carry out a shadow war in Europe, which is what the Russians have been doing now for years. It is all quite connected, because the Russians have for years, and this was an old Soviet policy, seen more extremist parties on the left and the right as great opportunities to disrupt and divide countries. So in the Soviet period, they invested very heavily into communist movements across the world. They tried to push back against mainstream political parties that are more aligned with the United States. And in the post-Soviet period, they've seen the opportunity with the far right. And there's a long history across many European countries of the Russians really trying to, provide financing. There's documentation of this, or really infiltrate these far right political movements. But I think the real issue here is that these parties also have a worldview that would throw European security under the bus, would open the door to Russian and potentially Chinese influence as well across Europe, which I would think the US doesn't want.